Good morning, everyone. My name is Kenene Senior. I'm a senior lecturer and the research officer at the Moneague College. Today, my research focuses on the perception of faculty and students on impromptu online education. And you know what I'm talking about. Last year, March, we were thrusted into a new educational paradigm. And for some persons, they may have been adept at the online learning environment, but for many, they were not. And so we sought to understand what persons' experiences were like. And so we surveyed 275 students and 41 lecturers across our three campuses. The findings and our implications will be discussed. So, we have to first of all look at the literature and the theoretical framework that undergirds what is the essence of this research. So, the theoretical framework, first of all, we have to look at the fact that there is a perception gap in terms of our institutional infrastructure and the pedagogy that is now expected of us as we reimagine education. So, for many of our programs, they were set up for brick and mortar structure, right? And so transitioning to an online environment, there would have been some gaps between in administration and faculty, gaps between faculty faculty, and gaps between faculty and students in terms of the culture that exists within the institution, the mission, the span of control, faculty qualification, administrator support. There is also the whole idea of the community of inquiry model, where we consider that the educational experience consists of our social presence, our cognitive presence, and our teaching presence, which for many persons, they consider this to be a face to face kind of engagement. And if this is not done face to face, then how can we truly say that we have had an educational experience? There is also the theory of diffusion of innovation, which says that there are four factors that affect how innovation is adopted and diffused. So we still find that there are faculty members who are not as embracing of the technology, even though we have not had much choice in terms of its use. And Rogers says that there are four factors that affect this. The innovation itself. Many persons are still alien to the technology, even our students. How the information about the innovation is communicated, considering that we didn't have much time. So a lot of persons felt like the information was just rushed and pushed on them. Again, time and the nature of the social system into which the innovation is being introduced. We know the constraints and the system within which we operate, and how it would have presented challenges for persons to readily adopt the technology. So the literature points to, of course, the benefits of using technology and, online or distance education, whatever term we choose to use. Um, the benefits to be had, but also recognize that within higher education, there tends to be some amount of hesitance in embracing the technology. Some of the issues relating to bandwidth and access and university management buy-in and or human capacity to use the technology. It was found that there are teachers who report that using the technology increases the students' interest. But we also found in the literature that there is a low usage by teachers in higher education, more than likely linked to issues relating to technical skills, logistical skills, and also pedagogical problems. Um, the literature also points to the fact that um, there are deficits that are detected in the non-existence of a common unified practice in centers of higher education. So what you find is that those faculty members who are more familiar with technology, they do it their way. Others who are just coming on board, they do it their way, but there is no common or unified practice in terms of how we're going to go about this. And of course, because it was an impromptu um, kind of an environment, there was really no time to really sit down and say, this is what we are going to do in terms of technological practice. And remember, the findings again were conducted, the survey actually was conducted a month after schools had closed. So, of course, there is also, as we reimagine education, a need for us to look at what we consider to be contact time. In terms of contact time, the literature defines it as the time that a student spends physically in the classroom, listening to a lecturer, participating in discussion, taking an exam, whatever is required for time in class. There has not been much in the literature relating to contact hours in terms of an online environment, except that the American public university system found a way to quantify their online contact hours. We don't have much time to get into it, but I'm sure the PowerPoint can be made available. Now, in terms of our findings, we noted that while a number of our students indicated that they had access to the internet, um, 63% of the students, so that's more than half of our cohort, they noted that their access to internet had gotten worse since the onset of COVID. And in addition to that, they indicated that it would have provided or it would have impeded their ability to continue their studies. In addition, they noted that their mental well being, which we refer to as feelings of anxiety and depression, had gotten worse. That was among 71% of our respondents. In light of our continuation of educational pursuit, we found that persons had misinterpreted the question somewhat. And so some of our students who understand the question um, to mean that they would not be able to continue their educational pursuits generally, most of them indicated that they were uncertain of their ability to continue because of financial constraints, while others spoke about their dependence on personal and family savings. And of course, because we are located on the North Coast, many of our students were impacted by the fact that the hotels had closed. Others understood it in the light of the intent that, because of the online environment, they just could not keep up. And some of them spoke to the fact that they could not continue because they didn't have access to WhatsApp and Zoom and Google Classroom, and the internet access that they had would not provide them with the opportunity to stay on to these platforms. We also asked our students about the payment of their fees prior to COVID-19. And I want you to look at this carefully, that most of our students, they depend on family for the payment of fees. So undoubtedly, you're going to find that many of them would have had concerns about continuing their education. When we asked them about their access to internet at home, majority of them had internet. However, we noted that 60% access the internet via Wi-Fi, while others had to use data plan. So of course that speaks also to a digital divide, especially when we look at the fact that the primary devices that our students were using were smartphones, right? Few of them had laptops, even fewer had tablets, and some of them even indicated that the devices that they were using were borrowed. And so, even in terms of completing assignments, they had a challenge there. When we asked about the modalities that they were exposed to or they were using, as you can see from my chart here, majority of our students were being engaged on WhatsApp. Impromptu, yes. That was followed by email, and what you would identify as well is that our faculty would have been using more than one modalities with the students, trying to see how best they could get in touch with everybody. So there was WhatsApp, email, Schoology, Zoom, Edmodo, and Google Classroom. So we asked the students then to talk about what they found to be the most effective modalities. And of course, the modality that was used the most was considered to be the most effective by 206 of the students in the survey. Email was then identified by students, followed by Zoom. And so we found that the students had a preference for WhatsApp because most of them already have access to it. It's easy to use. It's a faster mode of communication, and from what was indicated, it does not require a lot of data. Many of them spoke to the fact that they liked Zoom because it facilitates the face to face interaction, which kind of supplements for the fact that they are not inside the physical classroom and they are still longing for that kind of experience. And then there's Schoology, which they consider to be effective because it can be accessed at any time. So, in the event that they missed a Zoom class, they could always go to Schoology to access the information. When asked about their level of comfort with the online environment, we found that there was the students were basically uncomfortable or very uncomfortable. And only five of our students indicated that they were very comfortable with the online environment. And just to share some of the comments, the college had to close because they had no choice. But the online classes are not working for me because I'm a visual learner and I learn better when I'm sitting in the classroom. I am facing a very difficult challenge at home without Wi Fi and buying data. Another student said the online classes is a good attempt, but the internet access for students is very poor. I recall having classes and having trouble to see what the lecturer is displaying on the screen. Getting the assignments on WhatsApp and test is a plus, and at least I receive those as WhatsApp is the only app that works properly on my phone. Not to call or video call, just to send text messages. All right. And those are some other comments. My lecturer doesn't understand that students don't have the devices to complete work in a timely manner. I'm suffering as a student, only submitting work that's not sufficient for my learning. Reconsider the amount of tasks that are handed to us as we are already flooded with coping with the virus. I believe closing the campus was a great move, and I honestly thought online classes would be a blast, but it's not. Some lecturers just want to mark our names and that's it, while others try to have a meaningful session with us. All I know is that online classes are much more complicated than face to face classes. It's like we're not learning anything at all, but we still have to do what we have to. Some of us are panicking and clearly stressed out, which makes us unable to focus, especially when the cases are rising. So it's best to hold off online class and start over 2021. It would be interesting to do that survey again to hear what the students are now saying now that we are in 2021. So, coming out of our findings, we are recognizing that our students have serious issues with access and connectivity. There's also a disconnect between our students' learning needs and the feature of the online or features of the online delivery. So, a lot of our students do not recognize that when it comes on to online delivery, there is more expectation of independent learning. And they also struggle with the idea of meeting deadlines. They talk about the ideas of multiple learning styles, even though the literature says that the online learning environment should be able to cater to multiple intelligences and multiple learning styles. Being thrusted into an online environment that you were not prepared for, it presents a challenge for the students who feel that it is what they're getting now is a one size fits all. Many of the students, even though the comments are not there, spoke to the fact that you know, I need proper engagement. And so if you send work to them, they do not consider that to be contact hours, right? Their idea of adequate engagement and contact is when you're sitting in front of a screen or when you are face to face. And so as we reimagine education, we have to consider what contact hours really mean. Of course, we recognize that there are lack of resources to effectively and efficiently participate in the online learning experience, and there is a digital and device divide. There are issues relating to lecturers within the online space where students just feel like faculty don't understand, right? As it relates to our faculty, we found that 85.4% said that they had the infrastructure to easily communicate with other faculty members and students. Um, a few did indicate that they did not have these resources, which is the reality. We don't all have what we need to do to facilitate the engagement. Faculty members were asked to say how the following had been since the closure of the college: internet access, ability to facilitate the teaching learning process, and their overall psychological well being. From the 41 persons we surveyed, 20 persons said that their access to internet had gotten worse than before the college had closed. Um, their ability to facilitate the teaching learning process, majority of those indicated that that had gotten worse. And when asked about their overall psychological well-being, we saw that majority of our faculty indicated that it had either gotten worse or much worse. In terms of internet, we found again that majority of the faculty members had access to the internet at home. A few did not, and majority of them were using Wi-Fi to access the internet. The minority using data plans. When you look at the modalities that were being used, you'll recognize that the students and the faculty's table would mirror each other because, of course, the faculty would have been using these modalities with their students. A few of the faculty members indicated that there are some tools that they use. There are other tools that they use. The students did not mention these. Could mean that their students did not respond to the survey. Um, in terms of the preferred modes of communication, we found that our faculty preferred the Zoom, WhatsApp, and Schoology, similar to our students. And it is because they felt that the lessons can be completed in real time. They facilitate interaction. And they noted, the faculty noted, that WhatsApp seems to be more convenient for the students, especially if they're using data plans. And Schoology, as the students had indicated, provides the students with the opportunity to access the information at their convenience. Just like our students, we found that just around the same amount, percentage, sorry, indicated that they were either uncomfortable or very uncomfortable with the online learning environment. Our faculty was asked to identify what the major challenges and opportunities were in terms of the online environment. And as you can see, the challenges outweighed the opportunities. So they noted that, they had to go back to the drawing board in terms of designing alternative assessments for CCCJ. They had to now be struggling with work-life balance, data plan limitations, um, the whole idea of non-participation of some students. And I don't know if as early as 1 month into the game, we could say that some of the students were dealing with Zoom fatigue. But once they turn off those microphones and those cameras, they are as good as not in class. There were issues relating to visual difficulties and ergonomic issues because of the prolonged sitting and screen usage, students not honoring deadlines, the increased workload. Some faculty members recognized that students had become excessively needy and disregarded personal time. And of course, some identified that they didn't have the resources, the computer, tablets to facilitate the online learning experience. And then they did recognize some opportunities like increased competency in online delivery and sharpening of technological tools because, of course, a number of courses, free courses, became available to better equip faculty. There's greater attention being given to alternative assessment paths, and there's increased flexibility in facilitating college activities. So some of the things coming out of this study, the need for us to bridge the digital divide, um, the idea of reconceptualizing contact hours. We may be saying that this is how online learning is supposed to be, where you engage the students in both synchronous and asynchronous approaches, but we need to bridge the perception gap that exists between administration and faculty and students in terms of what we really consider to be contact time. Do we have to sit in front of a screen for students to feel as if they are being engaged? We have to also talk about the fact that there needs to be some amount of psychosocial support for online learning for students and faculty, because what has become a big thing now is e-learning and Zoom fatigue. Too much exposure, prolonged exposure to the screen time and sitting, the toll that it can take on individuals mentally and physically. We have to, of course, become more proactive in terms of providing training in the online and delivery of courses. And of course, we have to look at how we go about designing our assessments going forward, because in the event something like this ever happens again, we are going to be prepared. Thank you very much for listening to my research. And I trust that as we reimagine education, these things will be taken into consideration.